Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lion's Heart. And today, what we're going to dive into is the nature of God. So, this is something that humans have been fighting wars over, arguing, debating, thinking about, philosophizing about for literally since the beginning of humanity, since we were able to look at ourselves and have that self awareness and wonder, why am I here? What am I doing here? What is the purpose of this? Is there something higher behind this? And if so, what is that thing? And we call that thing God. So is there this God? Is it angry? Is it nice? What does it want? How do I please it? All of these questions. And in this video, I'm going to point out and discuss our top two belief systems in modern society, which are science and religion. I would say about 90 to 95% of people today fall into one of these two categories as far as their beliefs about what reality is, if there's a higher intelligence, if there's God. And what I'm going to be doing in this video is pointing out why those two viewpoints and belief systems are incorrect. And I want to emphasize that this video, it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of wanting humanity to evolve genuinely and wanting people to escape their suffering and realize the truth of what they are, because what they are, who they are, is so much more beautiful, deep, and profound than a belief system like a religion or a scientific viewpoint of reality being meaningless and random. So that's really the point of this video. It's not to feel like I'm better than people or to make people feel bad or judge. I really just want to bring higher consciousness, and we always have the ability to change our belief systems and grow and evolve. And sometimes there is a pain and a challenge in, questioning your beliefs and questioning your view on reality, especially if you're very attached to it. And that can be hard to face and it can be painful, but there also can be a lot of beauty in transcending that, overcoming that, and opening to new possibilities and direct experiences of what reality might be. And I'm not saying that science and religion are bad in any way. They've done a lot of good for humanity. They've evolved humanity in a lot of ways, in specific ways. Science has definitely helped us to have new outlooks, perspectives, technologies, and amazing things for society. And religion also has helped a lot of people find meaning, purpose, value, and wisdom in their lives. There's a lot of wisdom in religious texts. There's a lot of wisdom in these principles that religion follows, these commandments, things like this. There's a lot of wisdom and goodness there, and I don't want to make it seem like these are bad things. It's just that they are incorrect about the nature of God and what God is. And I want you to just note before we dive in that for most people, religion and science are belief systems, right? Most people that have a scientific, atheistic outlook on life, they didn't actually go and do the experiments to figure out that atoms are the basis of reality. They didn't go and figure out the experiments to figure out that the Big Bang happened and these things. It's something that was passed down to them through their culture and that they accepted as a belief system. And it's the same exact thing with religion. Religion is a belief system that people adopted from their family, their cultures, their churches, things like this. And they didn't actually directly, experience the teachings of Christ, for example, or Muhammad or these things. They were passed down to them and then they kind of absorbed them as beliefs. And for this video specifically, and for everyone who's doing a questioning of reality, direct experience should be king. It should be able to stand against any kind of belief systems, any kind of skepticism or doubts. Direct experience should be exactly what is the proof in itself, right? And consider that it's possible to directly experience what God is, and that this thing we call God is not something separate from you, the experiencer, and that it's the possibility that reality is structured in such a way that you can literally uncover and discover what this is, and you can figure out the workings and the mechanics of reality and who and what you are and who and what God is through direct experience, through deconditioning the mind, through questioning reality, through wondering about reality, through going within. Because imagine that there is a God, right? Wouldn't that God be directly linked to reality and its creations? So wouldn't it be possible for its creations to inquire into this question and figure out what God is? And lastly, before we dive in, you might be wondering what the fuck my credentials are to speak about God, something as mysterious, massive, unknown, debated, fought over thing as God. And I would say that that's completely valid. That's a completely correct way to think, completely correct assessment to have. And all I will say to help maybe validate my credentials is that I have spent the last 8 years of my life pretty much full time contemplating, meditating, doing yoga, trying psychedelics, trying various spiritual techniques, doing silent retreats for 17 days in silence in nature, working with some of the best spiritual masters in the world, sitting with them, asking them questions directly, reading from some of the best books and the best resources that we have today, studying these things inside and out over and over again. I've gone to darkroom retreats, I've done vision quests, anything you think, I've probably done it a few times over and studied it. So I will say that in this sense, I do have more experience and practice than your average person. And there is more of a validity there to speak about something like God, in the sense that I'm not going off any belief systems. Everything that I speak about here is direct experience. And if you can, create the possibility that through practice, through study, through working with masters, there is a possibility to become directly conscious of the nature of God, the most sought after question by human beings since the beginning of time. And that there's a reason why these monks, these yogis, these sages go and do these practices. They go and live in the mountains for 40 years. They go and do this yoga for, they're not just doing that randomly. There's a reason, very specific reason that they're doing this. And there's a very specific experience and consciousness that they are trying to become aware of through these practices. All right, so let's start with religion. Most religions, we can say, believe in this separate God, right? This man, bearded man who lives in the sky, and he kind of looks down on everybody and looks down on his creation and is kind of like in the sky, separated, watching everything. And you can interact with him, you can pray to him, you can, uh, ask for help, you can talk to him, these things. But what we want to question here is who came up with this notion that God is a man in the sky? Was it a bunch of men? Like, God is a bearded man in the sky. Was it a bunch of bearded men who came up with this notion? Yeah, mostly bearded men came up with this notion that God is a bearded man. Why does God have to be a bearded man? Why is God a man? Why is God a human? Just something to question. And let's say that dolphins somehow evolved to be able to have self-awareness and ask these same questions. Do you think that they would maybe come up with the idea that God is a dolphin? And what if dogs all of a sudden could conceive of a higher intelligence to reality? They might start to think that God is a piece of bacon or a dog. So you see what I'm pointing at here is that there's this notion that God is also a man, God is also a human, is very self-biased. It's very selfish. It's very like we're just saying that God is us. Like, why does God have to be a human? Why can't God be a flower or a tree? And what's funny about this is that we laugh or we make fun of or we think less of indigenous cultures because they do things like, dance to the rain gods and pray to the sun gods and, pray to the god of, fertilization for the plants. While we think, religious people think that we're more superior because we have this other form of the right God. But what if like an angry God, this angry bearded man who's in the sky, who's judging its creation, is just as ridiculous and silly and childish of a notion of God as the indigenous version of the rain god and the sun god? And this also brings me to another point on religion, is this whole thing of like judgment and hell. Like, what kind of dick would create something that is as horny, selfish, and ignorant as a human being, and then tell it that it has these very strict rules that it can't break, and that if it breaks it, when it breaks it, it's going to spend the rest of eternity burning in hell? I mean, do you see the ridiculousness of this? Like, why would that be? How does that make any sense at all? Like, what kind of asshole would create something just to judge it and punish it? And another point on self-bias is, isn't it funny and interesting how people who are born into a certain religion, like say they're born into Christianity, a Christian family or a Muslim family, they kind of automatically assume that that's the right one if they adopt the belief, if they adopt the religion. They kind of just, no questions asked, like, of course Christianity is the right one because I'm a Christian, because I was born into a Christian family. Like that's the one that goes to heaven. That's the right one. That's the chosen people. And just the level of self-bias and silliness here is just, it's really mind-blowing because, what if that same person as a baby was then given to a Muslim family and then they grew up Muslim? They would just think the same thing, but just with Islam. But when you're in it, when you're that deep in the trenches, you're that self-biased, there's no like open mind, open perspective to kind of see that and see yourself in that kind of hypocrisy. And another question for religion is, if there is this God that's separate, that's in the clouds, what created that God? Where did that come from? And who is that God's God? Is there a God on that God? And how is it possible that this God is actually separate from its creation? Like, how could anything be separate from the creator of this thing? And in most religions, the whole thing is functioning on beliefs and assumptions, and mostly fear as well. There's this huge fear that if you don't listen to the priests and the church, you'll go to hell. And this is what kind of keeps people, in their faith and in their religion. And there isn't much talk about like directly experiencing the nature of reality and going within, meditating, questioning reality, and coming to conclusions and answers for yourself. There's kind of this notion that like there's only certain people, chosen people like Jesus and the priest and the Pope, who these people have access to God, these people have a connection to God, and everyone else has to just kind of like trust that and follow that and have faith in it. And if you don't have faith, you're going to hell. And so just note that this is not a direct experience. This is not a direct consciousness of God. This is a belief. It's similar to like if someone hands me a croissant and says there's chocolate in that croissant, I will maybe believe them. I might believe that there's chocolate in that croissant, but until I actually bite into the croissant and taste the chocolate, I will not actually know or have the direct experience of that being a chocolate croissant. There would just be a belief there. And that belief could be wrong. I could bite into that and there's strawberry jam or there's nothing inside the croissant. Now on to science. And in my opinion, science is just as closed-minded and belief-based as religion. So basically what science says for the most part is, we've got it, guys. We've come to the conclusion after, our somewhat 500 years of modern science, we've figured out that reality is made up of atoms and molecules, and that is the basis of reality, and that there is no higher intelligence to it, there's no meaning to it, it's completely random. All of this came from the Big Bang, and that's where all of reality, that's the explanation for reality, and that's what it is. There's no God, there's no higher intelligence, it's just completely random. Now, my question to science is, can you really look at reality objectively and really state that it is random and meaningless and that there isn't a higher intelligence behind the functionings of reality? And science is really concluding that because they found the bottom of reality, which they're saying is molecules and atoms, that somehow this concludes or ties to there not being a possibility for a God or a higher intelligence behind reality. And they also kind of conclude that this means that everything is kind of meaningless and random. But my question again is, does science actually have proof that reality is material? Like, did they ever really prove, do they have like objective proof that reality is actually an objective material existence? And the answer to that is no, they don't. And so when we look at reality, when we look at our experience of reality, we see how seamless nature is. We see the laws behind reality, like gravity and evolution and sex and all these amazing things that are functioning behind reality, this kind of pre-programmed wisdom and innate intelligence in life forms. we can kind of start to question this this kind of scientific outlook that it's all random and meaningless. And you can kind of even see how science is a backlash and a reaction to religion, right? Like, for the most part, people saw religion, and for the same arguments I made, like how hypocritical and kind of silly and closed-minded it is. And so they kind of backlashed and came with like, okay, no, there is no God. Like, you guys are wrong. Religion is stupid. It's all random. It's all meaningless. It's all atoms and molecules, and there is no God. And the problem is that this is a reaction. This is a backlash, and they're kind of so blinded by this like annoyance and with the hypocrisy of religion that they've kind of closed their mind to maybe there is a God, but it's not the religious God. And so the problem is that scientists want this like objective, tangible proof of God. When what if the truth of the matter is that God isn't objective, God is subjective, and it's something that you are intricately linked with, and that it's something that you have to actually experience for yourself. And because it's something so obvious, maybe it's something so all encompassing that there is no outside of it. So there's no outside of God that can look at God because God is looking at everything, if there is a God. What if that God is so directly intertwined with reality that there's no way science could ever prove it because it is within science as a practice is within that awareness, that God. And I'm not saying that science is stupid. It makes sense that they're skeptical and they're questioning reality and they're questioning religion. But overall, the conclusion that there's no way that there's a God or a higher intelligence to reality is pretty closed-minded and silly. And it's a relatively new statement that from humanity that, you know, for centuries and millennia we have had always some kind of spiritual practice within our cultures and our traditions and our tribes. So to think that really in the last like 500 years we've figured it out and all humans before were silly, and that there's no way in the future we're gonna maybe make new discoveries about the nature of reality and the nature of God is actually a bit closed-minded and silly in itself as well. All right, and for the final, most powerful part of this video, I want to try to explain, based on my experience and the experience of many teachers, what the nature of God might be. So I want you to consider that, let's just say there is a God, right? If there is a God, and it wanted to experience reality, it wanted to have this experience, this exact experience that you are having right now, what would it do? What would you do? Let's say you are this God. You are this infinite, all-powerful intelligence. Pure love, pure infinity. There's no time, there's no space, and there's just this awareness that you exist. There's not even objective reality, there's nothing. There's just a knowing of yourself. There's just an awareness of I am. There's an awareness of being. You have infinite wisdom, infinite sacredness, infinite intelligence, infinite creativity. And you just have this knowledge that you exist, and you want to uncover that. You want to explore that. You're curious, like, what is this? What am I? You know, what is this I am? What is this awareness that I am, that I have of myself? Again, you have no limits, infinite power, infinite energy, and time is not a thing. If there was time, you would have infinite time, but it's not a thing. It's only now. So I want you to just imagine that. Really make it real. And what if you just started to imagine a reality, things, right? You wanted to create a stage for you to self-explore, because what you want to do is know who you are, is to understand yourself, to explore yourself. So this would require a stage, right? So what you started to do is beginning to imagine a reality, like a stage for which you can self-explore on. And what would this reality need to function and be taken seriously, right? So the stage would need objects, it would need beings, it would need space, it would need rules and laws and limits, things like time and gravity, right? And how would you become a part of this stage. So you're not just watching it from the clouds, but you're enmeshed in it, you're experiencing it, you are part of it, right? What you would need to do is separate yourself into different players and different beings on the stage with different personalities, species, races, pre-recorded codes, different programming, different genetics, right? Things would have to be different. It couldn't just be one same being interacting with itself. It would have to be there would have to be variety. There'd have to be uniqueness and different ways for you to explore and understand yourself. So you would need to separate yourself into different players or beings on the stage. And since you're infinitely intelligent and creative, there would be no trial and error, there would be no mess up phase, because you would know what to do. You would know what would work and how this stage would need to function. So there wouldn't be a phase where you're creating, gravity that presses people's bodies and crushes their bones. Like, you would know the exact amount of rules and limits and limitations and pre-recorded drives and desires, things like evolution, that would need to be in place for this to properly unfold in a realistic and intelligent manner. Trees, oceans, plants, planets, people, animals, life, death, sex, weather, gender, seasons, cycles, all of it held within your infinite intelligence. You could kind of just kickstart this thing and allow it to kind of unfold in its own kind of creative manner, but you've kind of preset the rules and the direction for it. Yet it's still a playground, it's still a stage, it's still a free reign where you can interact with it. It's like a sandbox, right? It's like you can create what you want in this stage. You can be who you want. You can do, whatever you want to occur on that stage within the preset rules and limitations that you've created for this stage. And again, since you would be a part of this stage, you would be a part of this play, you would have to split yourself into these separate beings while also being the objects and the limitations and the stage itself. But you couldn't really know that you were all of those things. Like, if you were a separate being, but you also knew you were a chair and you also knew you were the trees, right off the gate, it might ruin the game. So in order for it to feel real, you would need to deeply become ignorant and purposely become unconscious and ignorant of the fact that you created and are this whole thing. So let's say, for example, you wanted to be a human and have that experience, that human experience. You would have to create it from the scratch. So like being a baby and being born and all these things. And you would have to, before that started, completely forget that you created this whole thing and start it from zero. Because that is what would make the human experience real. If you were growing up and going through the whole experience knowing what it was and who you were, it wouldn't make it a realistic experience. It'd be kind of like playing a video game but knowing all the cheat codes. And so I just want to stress again that you would have to forget and become ignorant of the fact that you created this reality so that you could believe that you are separate. Now consider the possibility that this is exactly the truth. This is exactly the case of your experience right now. And get into your experience right now. Feel and look around at the room around you. Look at the chairs, look at the objects, feel the space around you. And consider that all of this is you. You're not separate from any of this. That all of this is what we might call God. But ultimately that thing we're calling God is you. So it's not really God, because God is a concept of something outside of you, but that everything that you are within and experiencing is you. Notice how your experience always changes. You grow up, you're a child, you become an adult, your emotions come and go, the rooms that you're in come and go, the things you're looking at come and go, people come and go. Everything kind of comes and goes and dissolves. Even your sense of self, your sense of who you are, when you were very young, was very different than what that is now. And it might feel real and solid, but you have to admit that even your sense of you, of who you are, of what you are, has changed over your life. And now consider that there's something within you that you are that's been permanent and been still and been untouched and aware throughout this whole time, this whole process. And consider that that pure, untouched, unaffected nothingness, that screen upon which your life has unfolded and reality has unfolded and changed, is God, or what we might call God. And that same nothingness, that same awareness is within everything in reality and every living being in reality. And that awareness within a dog is the same exact awareness that's within you. Consider that maybe it's possible that there is nobody inside of there. You think that there's somebody inside behind the eyes that's watching this video, but consider that that's more a story, that's more made up, that's more a thought versus an existential reality. And consider that there's nobody actually inside of the body behind the eyes, but that the body and the whole experience of reality is inside of an awareness. Again, I'm not talking about your story, your name, your culture, your background, your gender, none of these things. I'm talking about your existential nature and something that's not personal to you, it's existential. So forget yourself as a person for now. And just again, look around the room and consider that you're unconsciously constructing everything that you perceive right now, that all of this is your mind. And many researchers have actually confirmed that the brain hallucinates reality and what we perceive is not actually there. But I want you to take this even further and consider that the reason you're seeing, shapes and colors and chairs and objects is because your mind is actually doing that. You're actually creating and doing that. No one ever told you, that a chair was a chair, right? They just said the noise chair and pointed at an object, and then your mind created that object as a chair, when in reality it's just a bunch of pieces of wood stacked together in a certain pattern in a certain formation, and the mind conceptually creates that and turns it into a chair, right? And now consider that that's the case for all of reality, for everything that you're perceiving. And consider that maybe there's nothing here, that with your mind and your imagination, it's all being constructed out of quite literally nothing. And what if, similar to a dream, you're dreaming this reality? You're just unaware of how you're doing it or what's behind it. You're unconscious of what's the process behind that. But that this is just a much more consistent and solid type of dream versus the ones you might have when you're going to bed and sleeping at night. But that this is made out of the same exact stuff as the dreams that you have when you go to bed and you sleep. And what if that's actually what your nature is this dreaming entity or this dreaming consciousness, and that you're not actually the human being that you tell yourself that you are? And what if all this dream is just consciousness, infinity, pure wisdom, pure existence, wanting to experience itself through different forms? And what if all other people and beings are the same you, the same ultimate you, dreaming different dreams? So right now, I would be you dreaming this dream, and we would be the same entity or the same thing. And you're the same thing having that dream. But ultimately, we're the same being, we're the same dreamer, just in different dreams. And for this to work, these dreams would need to feel very real. They would need to be very consistent and real feeling, right? And just consider that you have a very extremely powerful consciousness, which ensured limits upon yourself and limits upon this dream, which as a human cannot be overcome, so that this dream remains a solid dream, so that you could give yourself the full human experience, to experience yourself through a limited form. And consider that this is maybe the truth, and that what we call reality is really all just self-constructed imagination and divine consciousness and infinite intelligence that we are intricately one with. Now consider that there isn't even a God at all. There is no God. And that you are just beingness. You are just this. And doesn't this kind of make more sense than there being a separate God than who made that God and that God? But that it's simply just an imaginative, infinite intelligence that began to imagine and create reality? What if there's really nothing here? There is nothing happening, and that you are located nowhere. You're, this is all happening almost like when you're dreaming at night. You're laying there asleep, but in your mind, maybe you're climbing the Himalayas. What if that's the same case with your experience right now? You're feels like you're moving, feels like you're doing things, things are happening. But what if this is just absolute, you're utterly still? Your existential nature is absolutely stillness and nothingness. And what if death, what we call death, is nothing but waking up from a dream? And that God, what we call God, is intricately linked and the same exact thing, no bars held, as you. And that what we call reality is simply occurring within your awareness, within the screen of your awareness. And that you're not inside the body, but the body is inside of you. And what if for a moment you could just drop all beliefs about reality, just experience what you're experiencing right now? The sounds, the space, the objects, and could just understand or feel that all of this is you. There is no separate person inside of there that is different from it. That all of this is just an extension of your own beingness. And instead of asking, why does God create evil? Why does God allow this? Why is God doing this? Asking the question, why am I doing this? Why am I creating this? Why am I allowing this? Because ultimately you are God and you're creating everything within your perceptive experience. And although you can't control, objective reality, like you can't, even though you are that chair, you can't do something to make it break in half. Respecting and understanding that you also put limitations on this dream, on this reality, so that you could fully experience it. And just kind of surrendering and accepting that. God is here to experience itself and here to be. And that is what you are, and that is what this is. You are God experiencing yourself through this form. And in the end of the day, at the bottom of the line, at the bottom of this whole understanding, this whole teaching, is that everything is okay. Everything is love. It's just, of course it's love. It's only you. It's only you here. Everything is fine. And there is nothing really ultimately to be afraid of. And that we can come into this dream and create the kind of dream, be the kind of gods that we want to be, and bring that awareness, that sacredness, and that love into every aspect of our lives. Again, why wouldn't you want to dream a beautiful and loving dream? I mean, you're God, so you can create a hell, you can create a selfish prison, or you can create a beautiful, loving dream and take that God realization into your life. Ponder this question. I know you might want to just call me crazy and this is ridiculous, this is bullshit, but just ponder this as a possibility. Ponder that maybe it makes sense, maybe it could be true. And consider the possibility that you are what we call God, that you are this reality, and that there is nothing outside of you. There is nothing outside of your divine, infinite imagination. And that everything that you don't know or that seems mysterious is, or a limitation, is something that you've purposely, intentionally put on yourself, not out of hate or not because you want to see yourself confused or suffer, but you put these limits on yourself and these misunderstandings on yourself and this ignorance on yourself so that you could have this joy and this bliss of this experience of awakening back to yourself and coming back home. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Much love, and see you guys soon. Cheers.